Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. The day you chose your children over your spouse and didn't know it. Welcome to Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham, and that's what we're talking about on the Blended podcast today. We're talking about parents choosing their children over their spouse, and it is a common problem. It is a big problem, and today we're going to address it. In a blended family, I know it happens in all families, but in a blended family, there is this tendency for a biological parent to choose their children over their spouse. Now, I'm going to just give the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say they don't always know they're doing this. Oh, sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. And I know that personally. I've been in a blended family 17 years now, and so I know what this looks like. So my question is, if you know you're doing it, why are you arguing with me, which many of you have over the last couple of years? Why are you arguing with me that children should be first in the home? I'm really not even going to spend much time on that because it's so untrue. Most people know it, but for those of you who are hanging on that children should be put first, I'm going to show you that that is absolutely the worst thing you can do in your family, for your children, and for your marriage. So let's dig in. First of all, let me give you a couple of strong passages about what a home should look like from the Bible. It's very clear in the very beginning in Genesis chapter 2, the Bible says, "A man shall leave his father and his mother, and he shall hold fast to his wife, and they become one flesh." It's amazing that when God instituted the family that he didn't even mention children. This is husband and wife. Why? It's the foundation. But not just there, that's the Old Testament. Go to the New Testament. You can read in Ephesians 5:25, "Husbands, love your wives just like Christ loved the church." He's establishing the home, no mention of children. Ephesians 5, he also says, "Let each one of you love his wife as himself." That's what he says to husbands. And then to wives, he says, "And for the wife, respect your husband." So it's clear in the establishment of the home that the husband and wife relationship is the most important. So we've talked about that several times. That's not the subject, but that's the foundation. But what happens? What I'm going to say today is going to make some of you angry. And if you're a biological parent in a blended family, there's a very good chance that you've chosen your child over your spouse. And maybe, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, and maybe you didn't even realize that you were doing it. So I'm not talking about whether you've chosen to love one and not love the other. I'm saying, yeah, you love your child and you love your spouse. I'm giving you that. But I'm talking about the hundreds of tiny decisions that quietly tell your spouse you'll always be second. That's what happens in a blended family marriage. I'm going to say more so than not. And maybe you don't even know it. So the issue isn't love. The issue comes into an alignment issue. You know what a child needs to know? A child needs to know that mom and dad's marriage is the safest place in the home. I know we've talked about that before, but it's still true. And when the relationship changes to things like, well, whoever's the loudest gets their way, things like that, the family begins to go adrift. So I'm going to give you some examples, and then I'm going to clarify why this happens. Let me give you some examples. So your spouse comes to you and says, speaking of your child, and says, "Johnny spoke really disrespectful to me today." And you know Johnny can be disrespectful. And then what's your response? I can predict it. Instead of saying, you know what, that is disrespectful, or saying, you're right, what you're going to do is you're going to begin to explain why Johnny acted that way. Now, do you know what you've really done? Listen, here's what you've really done. You've really said to your spouse, Johnny comes first. You've really said to your spouse that I'm not going to support you in your feelings. I'm going to stick with my child. Understand what's going on? Let me give you another example. Here's another one. Your spouse establishes a boundary. When I got married 17 years ago, when we started our blended family, you can go back and look at all the different podcasts. We've covered all of the different rules in a blended family, but there were a few things that for me, as the stepfather, there were a few things in our home that I call non-negotiables. These were just boundaries for everybody in the home, non-negotiables. But here's what happens to many homes, blended families, when you do that. Then your child comes to you privately, and your child complains to you about the boundary that they don't like. And you decide to reverse the decision, and your child feels relieved, and your spouse feels abandoned. Why is it that so many blended families end up in divorce? I just listen to the examples I'm giving you. These are the things that eat away at it. I'm going to give you another example. Let's keep going. Here's another example of what happens. Your spouse shares with you that they're hurting, and something related to the children. Instead of listening to them, you immediately begin to defend your child. That's your response. But the child wasn't the one who needed protection that day. It was your marriage that needed protection that day. Here's the truth. Let this stick. Every time your spouse brings you a problem and you instantly become your child's defense attorney, you have in some way, in some tiny bit, destroyed your marriage just a little bit more. Every time you do that. Every time you choose your child over your spouse, your marriage dies another inch, another several inches. Inch after inch, these little things eat away and begin to destroy your marriage. So, let me give you some balance to this whole thing. It doesn't mean that your spouse is always right. There were times, just to be vulnerable, there were times in the beginning that I know now I wasn't right. I was just stubborn. There were times, tell me if this is not true, if you're the step parent, tell me this is not true. Sometimes you're like, I just don't want my stepchild to have their way, because then they begin to think that they're in charge of this home. So you bow up and want your way, even though you realize that you're probably wrong. So I'm not saying that the spouse is always right. And neither am I saying that there aren't times that the child deserves compassion, because there is. The children do deserve compassion. I'm not saying that you ignore your child. That's why, biological parent, I want to hear your response to this. That's why the biological parent oftentimes feels like they can't win. They feel like they're always walking on eggshells because they're trying to appease their spouse and they're trying to appease their child, and that's a difficult place to be. So I know some of you feel like that. So I'm not saying always ignore your children's wounds. I'm not saying that. But your spouse, this is what I'm saying. Your spouse should never wonder whose team you're on. Your team family, but your team marriage first. Team marriage takes precedence over the children. Not in abuse, not when I'm talking about just in your marriage. it comes first. So, biological parents are very defensive of their children. Just admit it because it's true, I know. And so I spend a lot of time explaining to biological parents, why do I feel this way? Well, I understand because I have a blended family myself. I understand. Let me tell you the thing. Can I just show a little bit of frustration? Let me tell you what really frustrates me. I talk to a lot of blended families, and some of it's on this podcast. Many of you respond and you ask me questions. Some of you send me private questions, and I respond to them. And some of you have said this, I'm protecting my child. Why don't you understand that is really what you're trying to say to me. Why don't you understand I'm protecting my child? And I want to say to you, protecting your child from who? You're telling me you need to protect your child from your new spouse? That's why you're putting your child first? Well, you know what I'm about to say. If you have to protect your child from your new spouse, why did you marry them in the first place? If they need protection from your spouse, you should not have even gotten married. All of that. That's why I say to you 1,000 times, go through marriage counseling before you combine and create a blended family. You should not have to protect your family or your children from your spouse. So then why do you do it? Why do biological parents in a blended family most of the time, or at least very often, why is it that you choose your child over your spouse? Well, I'm going to tell you why. So let's just walk through these. Listen, just be honest. You got to get down to the real stuff going on if we're going to get better and stronger in our blended families. Here's why you will tend to choose your child. I'm going to give you several things here. One is guilt over your divorce. You just feel guilty over your divorce. I can relate to that because the guilt after my divorce was so heavy, and it was on me. It was on me. The guilt of that divorce will make you overcompensate for your children. And it's normal, but I just want you to be aware of it because it's not natural. I mean, it's normal because you feel guilt, but it's not natural for the child to be put first in a home. Here's another one, it's still dealing with guilt. You feel guilt over disrupting the child's life. You disrupted your child's life, or somehow through a divorce, their life has been disrupted. So again, you want to overcompensate because they've been disrupted. You know, one of the things that I had to come to in my own blended family, because I was feeling these very same things, one of the things that I came to was that I'm going to take what is definitely a disruption, but I'm going to contribute to my new stepchildren's lives in a way that is a blessing to them, that they can look up to me. It's going to create a home that they didn't have before. It's going to give them a solid foundation. I want to contribute all of that. So I want you to turn that guilt into a contribution and then watch the relationship grow. Here's another one. And this is a question that you ask. You put your child first because you feel guilty over introducing to them a step parent. So when do you introduce someone that you want to bring into the family? Someone that you want to marry, and they're going to become your children's step parent. You feel so guilty for doing that you want to do all of these things for them to prepare them for this decision. Well, communicate with your children, be open and honest with them, and do it slowly. But the guilt over it, don't overcompensate again by putting them in the center of the home. And then you feel guilty because you feel like, especially those of you who have been in a single home for a while, you feel guilty because now you have to share time with your new spouse. So you've put all your time with your children. You've done all of these things. I mean, when you were divorced, you basically, especially if you had your children most of the time. You put all of your time into them. But you know what? You have needs. You have adult feelings and wants and dreams and all of that, and you begin seeing someone and you're interested in each other, but it is going to require that you take away some time from your kids and share with them, and you feel guilty over this. So again, you start to overcompensate. So that's why it happens. That's why often we put our children first. By the way, I'm hoping that the person that you marry who comes into the family is going to be like one of you who responded a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, and you said you couldn't talk enough about the contribution that your stepfather made to your family and what he did for you. I got to tell you, there's no comments of the hundreds of comments. There's no comments that I get that make me happier than when you talk about how wonderful your step-parent was. That makes my heart jump for joy when you say that, because I've always wanted to be that for my stepchildren, and thankfully I feel like I have been. And I'm sure those of you watching, that's what you want for your family. You want your new spouse to be that person. Share this podcast with them. Become aware of some of the things that are going on. So, overprotection creates under support for your marriage. So let's wrap this up and close it in this way. The healthiest gift that you can give your children isn't letting them win the conflicts. The healthiest gift is to let them grow up and watch two adults, even in difficult circumstances, come together and create a solid family. That's the greatest gift you can give them. Children will always, always, always feel safest when mom and dad are closest, when your relationship is strongest, when the marriage is steady. That's when they're going to feel the best, not when you give them their way. So sometimes the very thing that teaches them and prepares them for life in love and in commitment and in security is what they see in your relationship with your spouse. So that's the attitude. I'm not overprotecting them. I don't have to overprotect them. Hopefully you married someone that has core values that's going to contribute to your family. You don't have to overprotect them. What you have to do is first build a marriage that creates security in them. So it's pretty normal that a biological parent chooses their child over their spouse, but it's not what's best for your child. So if you really want what's best for your child, it's not your protection, it's your solid marriage. So that's what I want you to work on. But before you can, be aware of your relationship with your child. And if it's out of line, now listen to this all over again, get it in line. Thank you so much for listening. And by the way, all of these things is going to come out soon in a new book that we have written in the blender. And as soon as it's out, I'll let you know, and you can have it all in one book. So thank you for joining us. See you next time.